What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome back. That was an awesome conversation we just had with Amon Shumpert and his brother. I mean, just leaning into all good things and good things that are Black and Blackness and all just dope things. And so I couldn't think of a better person I wanted to interview with on the backside of all that conversation than is my new friend, and I am calling her new because she came on the Zoom so fly. The CEO of Black Ambition, Felecia Hatcher. What's happening, Felecia?
Nothing much, Mike. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh my God, I'm so glad that you are here because Felecia, audience, Felecia is doing some incredible things around entrepreneurship, founder, startup life, changing the narrative, making sure individuals have access to capital, which ultimately will turn to wealth creation, wealth generation, legacy building, futurism, all the good things is Felecia Hatcher and Black Ambition. And so I am super excited to have you, Felecia.
Thank you. Yeah, all the things, Mike. all the things that you mentioned. And then more still has to happen on top of that to close the wealth gap. So yes, definitely all of that.
Yeah, as an audience, Felicia's here to talk about Black Ambition. They have this incredible grand prize of up to $1 million that can be awarded to startup and to founders to really do exactly that. And audience, you know, I talk about this all the time. Is my background is entrepreneurship, it is founders. Audience, I've talked to you all the time about when I was appointed as President Obama's My Brother's Keeper ambassador, really focusing on Black and brown males and entrepreneurship, and then the appointment of the United States Small Business Administration, really focusing on how to prepare the new backbone of our economy, which is millennial entrepreneurs, and how to get the government, financial institutions, academic institutions prepared to switch that narrative. And so this is why I'm excited to have Felecia on audience because she is doing that. Her organization, along with the incredible founders, Pharrell and the late great Virgil Abloh, have created this fund and this foundation to do what others are just afraid of and just are not doing. So talk about stepping up to the plate. That is what Black Ambition is doing. It's stepping up to the plate. How did you get involved with this, Felecia? And why did you see the importance and the need specifically for this opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur myself. I was an entrepreneur for 12 years, right? And prior to that, dabbled in things and then was raised by an entrepreneur. And so knowing that, I think, you know, in order to really create wealth and knowing that wealth has a need for speed, I don't know another vehicle fast enough than making sure that we're creating entrepreneurial pathways for Black and Latinx entrepreneurs, but then also making sure that like that pathway is uninterrupted, because we know so many things that have interrupted our people throughout our entire lifetime here in the United States, like racism, right? Bias in funding, redlining. Like I can go on and on, all the things that have literally interrupted our pathway of just being able to do the things that we want to do and build the things. But we also know our people are builders, right? We built this country literally, and we build companies every single day. But unfortunately, those companies aren't always matched with or met with the respectable amount of funding, because the funding is out there, right? And we've seen really big announcements coming after the murder of George Floyd, but the respectable amount of funding so that these companies have the luxury to innovate and have the financial runway to really be able to build something at scale, that's still lacking. And then the right type of resources, right? Not just, and mentors are great, right? And we need them on both ends. We provide them on both ends with Black Ambition, but not just mentors that can say, you know what, Mike, you did a good job. Cool, keep going. Like, no, you need mentors that can tell you when you messed up, when you're doing it right, but more than anything, when they pick up the phone, they're leveraging their relationships and their reputation to truly open the doors for you. And we've seen that with Black Ambition. And so, we fund entrepreneurs with check sizes ranging from 25K to 1 million. Last year, we invested in 34 companies, with the top prize winner being Logistics, a really amazing company out of Detroit with a construction SaaS company, third generation in the construction space. And Justin and his team said, like, we don't necessarily want to be out like in the field, right? Like, or building homes and like building businesses. There has to be a better, more efficient way to be able to do this and solve this problem. And they married technology with that. and we funded them at $1 million. They just closed a $6 million seed round. And Justin is one of those people who will tell you, like, he was like, I would have paid for the Black Ambition experience if I could have, right? With $1 million, nice, right? But that's a testament to just what it really truly means to build an environment for Black and Latinx entrepreneurs that's a little bit more of a holistic approach, supporting like the entire and whole entrepreneur, and then really creating a magnetic force for the resources that they need to build thriving companies.
I love all that you said. There's so many great nuggets that you dropped in there, and you were flowing, and I didn't want to interrupt you. But one thing I want to pick up on, and shout out to Justin and that team and third generation contractors and real estate. It was a construction development company, I think you said. Yeah. Construction. I'm from Michigan, so shout out to that, from Lansing, Michigan. So Team Detroit all day. You mentioned respectable funding. Talk to us about a little bit what you mean by respectable funding. I really want to pull that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there is this, and I'm in the nonprofit space, right? But there's this kind of charitable nature to funding Black and Latinx entrepreneurs that can be a little bit problematic, because it's just like, here's $500 and you better be happy with that. Although what I really need is $5 million, right? Like the $500 is great, but it's not going to do anything for me. We should be respecting an ROI from our investments into Black and Latinx entrepreneurs. One, because they can produce it. And two, the accountability is different and your expectations are much different of those entrepreneurs when you really truly fund them at the level. We see it on the other side, especially in the venture space, where we see companies like run through money, millions of dollars, and then their companies crash and burn, and then they raise another, $100 million to do the company. We know some of these companies, right? We're not going to put them out there, but then when it comes to Black and Latinx entrepreneurs, they're starting to get the meetings, they're starting to get the small checks, but not the checks that truly allow them to hire and recruit the best talent and be able to position themselves, right? Not being able to fight those supply chain logistics issues that requires a lot of capital. We have companies that we invested in the hardware space. 1,000 or even 10,000 is not going to really move the needle for them, but they need real capital and real expectations. And what we've seen is when we fund these companies at a high level, they return at a really high level. Studies have literally shown that Black and Latinx companies are more responsible with the funding and they produce outsized returns. They're just not even getting that funding part in order to really show what they can do. We've always produced something out of nothing. That is our nature, but that shouldn't be the requirement in this space. They need the right funding. And then of course they need everything else that comes along with that.
There's so many different elements I want to talk to you about that's coming to me right now, because you're really highlighting so many amazing things. The size, the respectability of the funding. I'm actually even now thinking about, like you mentioned supply thing. I was thinking like, where are the bottlenecks? Because before it was difficult just to be able to get out of a seed round or even to be able to do pre-seed, right? And so that was a challenge. And it was a challenge even getting the meetings or even getting into the door. And so to your point, now we are able to get the meetings, we're getting into the doors. I'm curious about Black and Latinx founders with making the ask. Where is that shift happening? Do you see a shift happening where we're just so thankful to get the meeting, so whatever you give us, we're good, right? Because there's something about, you said, the audacity that some of these white founders have. Like, they will fail and then they fail up, right? And then they get bigger investments and then they'll fail again. And then they'll just get more rounds of investments with ease. But for us, a lot of this, we're so new to this founder space, right? As a collective, right? Even the terminology, right? From entrepreneur just to founders, right? So the terminology is even shifting. Is that, are we going in now with expectations that we can close a $6 million round in seed, or are we still at the space of, we're so thankful to be here? So, or do we need to focus on shifting that narrative too as well?
Yeah, there's a combination of all of that happening, right? And so I think that's why like incubators and accelerators are so important, because they teach you the language of wealth. It teaches you proximity to power and what to do with it. A lot of the entrepreneurs, even in this past year of running the program, we saw a lot of that, right? Like, we're Black ambition, but we're not always seeing the ambition when it gets to the meeting. Some of that is imposter syndrome. a lot of that is that oftentimes we just haven't healed the toxic relationship that Black and Latinx entrepreneurs have with money. The way that we grew up, the scarcity, not having it, not fully understanding our value, right? Not fully understanding what we've built until something has been stolen. And so one of the things that we added in our program that we thought was really important was we added therapists and like mental health and wellness support for our founders. I don't know how you build an entrepreneurship program coming out of the pandemic and post the murder of George Floyd without making sure that like our entrepreneurs have the mental fortitude to keep going, the mental fortitude to like keep getting the no's until they finally get to yes. And I think people rattle that like get as many no's as possible, but like that's hard to wake up every single day. I know that I've raised venture funding and it was crazy for us. And so that part is really important, right? We think of all the predatory things from a financial standpoint that have happened in our communities. I remember when a VC approached me and my husband when we were running a food company. My dad has been an entrepreneur for 30 years. And I was like, they want to invest into our food business and it's almost $1 million. But the first thing that my dad said is like, is that a scam? Right. That was his first response to us. And this is a seasoned entrepreneur who has also raised a lot of money. Like that was the initial reaction because that is what oftentimes happens in our community around money. And sometimes people coming outside and seeing the value that we may not necessarily see. Right. And so that's why it's important to have a really good circle around you who've been there and have done it before so they can recognize things. They can help you negotiate your term sheet. But because there's been so many things that we get in these rooms and then we don't ask for the thing that we need. And I've been telling most of our founders in our program, like it's big ask season. Ask for the thing that you want. The worst thing that they're going to say is no, but the best thing they're going to say is like, yes, I can write that check or I know who can get it. But you're right, Mike, you hit it on the head. A lot of our founders are getting the opportunities. They're getting the invitations. They're now at the dinners and those dinners have to turn into deals. And we have to do a good job and everyone has to do a better job of training them to be prepared for those moments and understand truly what it takes in order to build those companies at scale.
Because I think there's a there, and I'm discovering it even myself as I'm talking with you, because there's always been an effort in corporate America to make sure, well, in corporate America, there's this narrative that Black and Latinx are being underpaid, which we are, right? And there's always this push in terms of know your value, know your worth, ask for that promotion. You deserve the promotion. Ask for that starting salary or ask if when you're getting a new job, say, this is what you need to pay me, pay me my worth. There's always that. But that trauma that we exist, even in corporate space of knowing our value, knowing our worth, why wouldn't that transfer into the founder space, right? And so there is this, I believe that what we're touching on is this narrative of that. We have to make sure we're encouraging our founders. I love how I said, this is big ass season, right? Mm-hmm. To go big. Just as you would change that narrative in corporate America, we also do have to change that narrative in the founder space too, as well, to be comfortable in making that ask, knowing your idea is worth as much as the next person's idea, if not even more, right? Mm-hmm. And I love how you said earlier about, we don't know the value until it gets stolen from us, right? And so I always talk about Felecia. I focus big on IP. And I look at IP as social justice, right? And part of the challenge with that is because society and structures have taught us that Black culture and Latinx culture, our isms are not a value, right? And so then they co-opted the value for their marketing or whatever they want to make it a commodity on. And then to your point, that's right, we get mad. And so I always say, no matter what, fight for your IP. If you have an idea, you have a saying, see if you can get in patent, see if you can get a copywritten, see if you can get a trademark, because we are of value, right? And so I think we're just in this space, though, like of narrative shifting. So thank you for bringing that narrative, big ass season, to the table.
And Pharrell talks about that a lot, right? Like just in the creation and development of Black Ambition, it was just like one of his biggest mantras around the work that we do is sharing the codes. He's like, people just don't share the codes enough. And all of us collectively can share the codes. Like, I can remember times in my life as an entrepreneur where I was really uncomfortable having money conversations with my friends. But then how do I know if like I should go down that route with this investor or not, if we're not talking about like, well, this is how much money they have, right? Or like this funder or this opportunity or this, like, we have to just get comfortable. And it's uncomfortable, but the only way to like make it comfortable is to say, this is uncomfortable, but can I ask you, what are you raising right now? Can I ask you what your starting salary was? So I know when I go into a negotiation, if they're not giving me that, like, I'm going to walk away, because that's your power within a negotiation, is being willing to walk away. But we have to share the codes more. And like by sharing, it does not take away from anyone or anything else. It actually, rises the tide for all of us, right? A mentor of mine, like I used to always talking about, like the pie is big enough for all of us to get a slice, because I'm very optimistic and I believe that. And he said, Felecia, no, the pie is actually not big enough for all of us to get a slice. My mentor, Myron Golden, he said the pie is not big enough because when you eat your slice of the pie, that's it. He said, what we should all be striving for is to eat from the garden. Because when you eat fruit from the garden, at the end of you consuming what you need to eat, there are seeds at the end of that. And you plant those seeds and it produces more fruit. So your consumption actually produces more. So we should be striving to eat from a garden and not a pie. The pie has a limit. The garden is limitless. And like that was the biggest reframe around all of this, right? Like your consumption is going to produce more when you think of every opportunity as a garden. When you think of Black Ambition, we think of it as a garden. It's an opportunity. There's a restorative nature to it, right? Like we're going to replenish with what we're doing, and we can approach everything like this. And I think especially from a Black community standpoint, like when we look at things more like that, like by sharing, we actually create more. And then we are unstoppable. We are absolutely unstoppable.
Audience, I know you had the same reaction with that garden narrative. In my mind, I'm like, I'm rewinding this conversation. Just the conversation has been so fruitful up to this point, but that comment about the garden was absolutely brilliant. That just changed my mindset on so many things too, as well, because that is what the system and circle of life is all about, right? And so it's just kind of just adding on to that. Felecia, we are going to talk about, and audience, I know you guys are probably itching, like, how do I get in on this, right? And so we're going to get in, we're going to understand the mechanism, how to apply the timelines. I know everybody wants that $1 million check, and I support that. But this is so good. I just want to talk about the structures and the systems that you're engaging with. Are you start to seeing other VCs begin to look at the value of Black and Latinx founders and starting to be willing to open up the checkbooks, right? So that we don't even have to build up this momentum to go big for the big ask. They're already ready to meet us at the table with the ask. Do you see the check sizes changing from the other side?
Yeah, well? So I have seen a shift, right? And I would be remiss to say that I haven't seen it, because I have seen it. Are we seeing it as much as we think we should see at this point? Absolutely not. But I'm definitely seeing it. I'm seeing more investors, especially investors that don't look like us, starting to better realize that like our culture is an asset. So like our entrepreneurs aren't spending days and weeks and months and meetings upon meetings trying to explain the market potential of like the Black and brown community, right? Like we're literally the global majority. And the only thing, right? And it was like,
Felecia, that I'm trying not to talk when you talk because I don't want to mess up the camera, so to shift to you. But like, I just had like that.
Yeah. But then, Mike, the other part that I don't think is getting enough conversation or attention is like just the rise of Black funds, right? And I saw corporations and foundations start funding funds so that more of us are actually like investors. And so that shift has started to happen as well, definitely within the last 2 years, which is positive. But then there's things that we can do in our communities, right? I think we used to joke in my old organization, Center for Black Innovation, like, what happens when your friends and family can only give you a round of applause and like not a round of funding? Like, what do you do? But what do you do is like, we have pockets of wealth throughout our communities and across the nation, but we dismiss and we use generalized terms of saying Black people don't have money or brown people don't have money. they need to be approached as investors, just like you would approach like an institutional investor. We are seeing entrepreneurs being able to raise a friends and family round. Maybe it's not $500,000 or $1 million, but $100,000 to give you that initial runway goes a really long way. And Justin from, our $1 Million Prize, when I talked about like how he was able to pitch his family during a Thanksgiving dinner and raise $100,000. We can do things to make sure that we train more high net worth individuals in our communities to become accredited angel investors. That's taking them along. That's taking people in our communities that are in the healthcare industry or in the legal industry, and these are some of the highest paid spaces or industries in our space, and helping them become accredited angel investors so that there's more capital in our communities for those initial investments and those initial checks. Like, there's work that we can do on an individual basis in order to increase the number of investors at the early stage that look like us. And then getting them to be better advocates for the resources that come to them that ultimately can really benefit the startup and entrepreneurial space as well.
So you were just blowing my mind a little bit with the thought process, and even you're helping me uncover some of my blind spots, right? Because what you're addressing now is a holistic approach to eliminating that gap of funding that we have for Black and Latinx founders. Even in my advocacy, I've always been about, we need to make sure that we have access to capital. We need to make sure we have the ability to do it. We need to make sure we have the ability to raise. Our product, our mind, our IP is of value. It's always about encouraging founders to make that step, get off of the couch, go big, right? So all those different things, changing the system, breaking up the structures, seeing how government can get involved. So I've always been looking at it from all those areas and aspects of advocacy, but I never even looked at it from the perspective of changing the mindset and advocating within our community, right? Within our own, and do the narrative shifting there about being an accredited angel investor, recognizing that we do have money even in our community and not to be afraid to ask and approach those individuals, making sure our individuals who have high net worth or some type of wealth can assemble their own fund and pool in together. I always talk, and so as amazed how the blind spots are being removed, I always talk about criminal justice from a holistic point of view. I'm like, no, it's just not about the police officer in the community, right? And the DA and the judge, it is, but it's also about school, education. Why is there high crime in certain areas? Well, take me to the unemployment rate. What is the graduation rate? What is the housing, market looking like in these communities? Those are the holistic. I never looked at the funding space holistically, right? To even talk to our community about it. Because Felecia, I have so many friends, and you do as well, who are like in the private equity space, right? And work for these, really great financial firms on Wall Street. Now, I always would talk to them like, you guys are so pressed to become managing director of these firms, right? Like, get your MD if that's what you want. But what if y'all came together and pooled and got your own PE firm? There's so many white boys on Wall Street who have private equity firms. You know this as well. And it's like, there's so many Black brothers and sisters and Latinx brothers and sisters on Wall Street that they can pull these firms together. And so you just hit the nail on the money to illuminate that space.
Yeah. We've always funded our own projects and companies in our communities, right? Like, I always joke with, like, we pass a plate every Sunday in the Black church to fund like the roof campaign and the scholarship campaign and this, and like, that's the same utility as like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo or any of these like massive crowdfunding platforms that have raised millions of dollars. The utility is the exact same thing, right? You have a big financial hole and like peer-to-peer, whoever can do 5 here, 10 here, 1,000 there, and you come together for this common cause, right? Throughout the Caribbean, it's called Partner. Throughout the continent of Africa, for literally generations, it's been called Susu. So like, these things are not new to us. It's how we've always pulled together in order to fund things, to create our own banks, essentially, right? And so equity crowdfunding is something that you're seeing like a lot of really amazing like Black founders and Latinx founders do really well in. Dawn Dixon has raised millions of dollars, right? Angela Benton has raised millions of dollars. You have Max Tuckman with Caribou, who is, I think, was one of the first Latinas to raise over $1 million in equity crowdfunding. And so all these instruments are here for us to be able to fund our thing, but we have to believe in our ideas, right? And so, when we were talking about like, the ideas are here, they're in our community, we create the vibe and the excitement, and then they're stolen. But how many times did people probably laugh at people doing partner or susu, right? Or I always tell people about like the utility of Uber Pool. You remember Uber Pool? They had it for a few years, right? That there's just strangers piling into a vehicle, paying a fraction of what they would normally pay to go from point A to point B. But that's no different than the Jitney taxi, the Judah taxi, in Haiti is called Tap Tap. Like I can keep going and how like we literally solve massive transportation infrastructure issues in our communities with like these neighborhood vehicles that could take us around for a fraction of the cost. That is the exact same utility of Uber Pool. And so on one end, you have multi-billion-dollar companies, and on the other hand, you have the Jitney and the Judah taxi that some people are like, I'm not riding that. Like, like that thing's, but like it solved the same exact problem. And so we can't laugh at these things and call them hood and call them ghetto. Like every idea starts somewhere, but we need the belief, right? Because oftentimes it's not another skill set or tool set, it's a mindset shift. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end of that, we need the funding, because if you're solving that problem with a Judah taxi or a Jitney taxi in Overtown or Little Haiti of Miami or in Harlem, that problem exists globally. And so we're literally solving and coming up with the ideas that have global impact. We just have to look at it as like, it also then has a global marketplace. And if we can talk about it as a global marketplace, then there's a valuation that can be high enough for it to receive the funding, for it to scale really, really fast. And those are some of the shifts in language and conversation and access that we really need to be having.
Audience, that right there is it, because that is why I focus so hard on IP, right? And the importance of that and the narrative switching of like putting value on our culture, our isms, our slang, our style, our fashion, whatever we say can be of value. It can be a commodity, I think. And that was just a great illustration of that example of the jitneys and dollar vans, right, in the outer boroughs and the Bronx and Brooklyn, where what we would laugh at that, but all of a sudden Uber Pool, began to do that. That's a great example of what we're talking about and how we don't see what we can have as a value. But then once it gets into the white space, all of a sudden it's dope, we trust it, and now we're willing to pay for that ride share, riding in a car with strangers, right? And so this is exactly what we're talking about. But also too, it's that mindset of recognizing the value of us and the ingenuity of us, right? And our culture mindset. Okay, Felecia, I can talk to you all day. So that just means that you have to come back on the Mike Muse Show, because I actually want to do more around the conversations of the holistic approach to the funding, and really if we can do things for our community and in order to change the mindset in the community to be more supportive, right? And how we can think about that in order to be the collective support for founders that are coming up. Talk to us about how Black Ambitions works for those who are interested in applying. So just in two phases. One, obviously we're gonna talk about the competition, but just in general, the wraparound services that Black Ambition provides founders who are interested in becoming founders, willing to take that leap, wanting to take that leap. How can why would they want to go to Black Ambition?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, so Black Ambition, there's really kind of three components to Black Ambition. And so one is our national prize competition, where we invest in startup founders. And so early stage startup founders in 5 categories: healthcare, tech, consumer products and services, Web 3.0, and the media and entertainment. And Web 3 and media and entertainment are new for us this year. We invest anywhere from $25,000 all the way to $1 million in those companies. And then we take them through a 3-month cohort style mentorship program. And so they're matched with some of the coolest, dopest mentors. And I'm like, I need that person as a mentor, right? But you think about the fact that like 5 HBCU startups were mentored by Jonah Peretti, the founder of BuzzFeed, right? Like imagine being a college student, your junior or sophomore year, and like that is your mentor that you meet with every single week for 5 months. Like that's the quality.
Nuts.
Right. And running a media company, right? Like that's the quality of the mentors and the resources. And then it's our job internally to like if you need an introduction, right, that is our job to make it happen on the back end. And so our companies, one of our companies is getting ready to roll out in all the Marriott locations, and that started with a conversation with one of the mentors in our program. Two of the founders, their mentors actually invested in their company. Trend.io is one of those companies where they receive investment from their mentors. Another one of our companies getting ready to roll out to 250 Target locations. I can keep going, right? Quite a few.
Wow.
We invested a little over $3 million across the 34 companies last year. They've gone on to raise over $50 million in venture funding. And we're not even talking about a year out of the program yet, right? And so that's a testament to when you fund at a high level and then you match them with almost like a matchstick of mentorship and resources. And what we've seen, and I think what our thesis is around this is give our people what they need from a business standpoint, and then get out their way, because they need it, and they don't need any other barrier that comes along when they start entering into new levels that have their name on it. And so being very smart and strategic about that support. They get pitch coaching, in high level pitch coaching, and not just being on stages, because that's important, but they need to be able to sit across the table from someone and be able to talk about the vision of where they can go and where their investment can go and how they can build the thing together. And that's a nuanced thing, right? It's talking about wealth and understanding wealth and how to pitch to the affluent. These are all the people that you're now talking to in this environment. And there's there's financial training, there's legal support, so they can hold on to their IP, right? And they can leverage their IP as well. And then we create glide paths into other accelerators. And then we have just a lot of really amazing corporate partners that also do leadership training, right? Like our leadership training with Chanel, I think to me was just such an important part, because now that you've raised funding, you are a different type of entrepreneurial leader. You now have to lead a team. Logistics went from, I think, 3 employees or 4 employees when they first started. Now they just hired their 23rd employee. And so you're a different type of founder that needs different type of leadership skills. And we provide that training as a part of the Black Ambition experience. And then our founder, Pharrell, holds fireside chats quarterly with all of our founders as well. And so they're able to kind of pick his brain. Although I hate the term pick, they get to borrow his brain.
I know what you meant. Yeah.
And ask questions and get feedback on his creative process. And, he's an entrepreneur with many hats as well. And so that's always a treat. And then we always have really amazing special guests that do office hours. Some programming is forward facing, most of it's internal. And then we do regional pitch competitions as well. And so we're in DC this week, and we're doing a pull up and pitch with Black Girl Ventures, and we're giving away $30,000. So someone's literally going to pull up and pitch and walk away with a really nice check. And we've done that in pretty much every city that we go to. We do a pitch competition. So we've done quite a few regionally as well.
I love that. My only question I would ask to Pharrell is, what is that brother's skincare regimen in the morning when he wakes up? I just want to know how much water.
Human race.
Right? Yeah, I know. Right? It was a setup for you to say that. He's how walk you right into it, Felecia. Right. That is the resources that are truly what is needed, right? And that is a commitment to founders and being founders to be successful. It just is that respectful giving. It's more than respectful giving, and it's removing the barriers, and it's propelling them, and it's allowing them to fly, and giving them not only the capital to fly, but the mindset, the mind shifting, the narrative, and giving them direction of where to fly to. Fly here to meet this mentor, fly here to meet this leader, fly here to meet this to get this information. So just job well done. As we wrap, Felecia, how can people apply? Tell us a little bit about the timelines and what it's looking like.
So the national prize, that deadline is June 20th at 6 p.m. Pacific is the time to get the application in. And then we do our demo day and kind of the big announcement in the fall. And so get those applications in as quick as you possibly can. It's not a lengthy process, but it starts the process. And then we have about a 3-month process in which we evaluate the applications and then ultimately award the founders that we invest in. I
love it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why Felecia Hatcher is Black Ambition. This is why she's the CEO. She has the heartbeat for this. You can tell the authenticity, the passion, and the wanting to help comes out Felecia, I'm just so proud of you and what you guys are doing over there to step in into that gap, right? That is for representation for Black and Latinx founders. I can't wait to keep the conversation going with you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yes, audience, get those applications in ASAP. Time is ticking.